Welcome to Your College Bound Kid,
a podcast for parents, college counselors, students, and anyone who wants a weekly deep dive into the world of college admissions.
My name is Vince, and I've been doing admissions since 1989 and college counseling since 1998 in California.
I'm Lisa, and I'm a clinical psychologist and college counselor. I have a daughter in college, a daughter in high school, and a son in middle school. After 30 years in Chicago, we recently moved to North Carolina.
My name is Mark. I'm a college coach in Atlanta and the parent of two daughters. Karis, a graduate of Davidson College, and she is the founder of the Spanish tutoring company, SpanishHelpToday.com. And Joy is a wellness coach at the Keenan Flagler Business School at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. And I'm so blessed to be able to work alongside both my beautiful daughters at School Match for You, college counseling firm that I founded in 2010. Good morning, friends. A lot of times I come to you and I'm a 9 out of 10. This time I'm a 10 plus on the enthusiasm meter. Just so many exciting things going on. I can't even begin to recount them. This is literally the trip of a lifetime, and I'm only on day 16. I still have 9 days left. I can't wait to share everything with all of you about everything I'm learning from all of these college visits. And so far, I have visited San Diego State University, University of California at San Diego, University of San Diego, Point Loma University, Chapman University, University of California, Irvine, Cal Poly, University of San Francisco, University of California, Santa Cruz, Santa Clara University, St. Mary's University, Cal Berkeley, University of California, Santa Barbara, and I had a 2-hour dinner with 2 Stanford faculty members, another 2-hour dinner with a Stanford student and his mom, and a 1-hour lunch with the University of California, San Diego faculty member. Now, last week, I mentioned to you how I want to start doing our spotlights moving forward. I'm very excited about this. So let me just explain a few more details. I want you to hold me accountable. A lot of our students, especially our seniors, they've got November 1 deadlines right now. Well, I'm giving myself a November 1 deadline for 2 things. One, I want to get a Google form up on our website that's going to list all of the spotlights that anyone on our team is willing to do. These would be schools they visited in the last few years. They feel comfortable doing a spotlight on. So I'll talk to everybody on our team and say, what are the schools you feel comfortable doing a spotlight on? We'll get them listed for you up there, and we'll let you select the ones you're most interested in, and we'll commit to doing a spotlight in the next 12 months. That's the plan. So I'm excited to do a little crowdsourcing here. And rather than us just making executive decisions on all the spotlights, let's weigh in. Let's hear from you. Which schools do you want to hear? So that's my first November 1 commitment. I'm get back October 2nd. I want to get to work on this right away. And the second thing I'm excited about setting up is we are going to be bringing back the revised, improved, and better college counselor confab. That's right. This is our college counselor meetings. And I have a partner now, which I'm excited to partner with Michelle Subernagel together with this from the great state of Washington. And we're going to make some changes. It's going to be a monthly meeting. And we are asking for people to commit to at least 7 of the 12 months in the year. We know people are busy. And we're going to have an inquiry form up to add more counselors to this group. And we are particularly looking for counselors in public schools that do college counseling, really committed to college counseling in public schools. Doesn't mean that's the only thing you do, but that's a big commitment for you. You're trying to hone your craft. Independent school college counselors. We're looking for more independent school college counselors and CBO college counselors. So the one thing that's unique about College Counselor Confab is it is the bringing together of 4 groups: IECs, independent educational counselors, public school, independent or private school, and CBO, all voices. And we believe in diversity. So we're looking for diversity of all types. We're looking for geographic diversity, gender diversity, racial ethnic diversity. We're looking for diversity of type of kids you work with. Some people work with more affluent, some more middle, some more under-resourced. We want all of that. And we want some international specialists as well. So we're going to look to launch that at the end of January. And we're excited about the rebirth. We did it before, but it was twice a year. And people enjoyed it, but the feedback we got was twice a year wasn't enough to build community. Once a month would be better, but recognizing people are busy, we're going to ask people to commit to at least 7 of the 12. And, more details to follow, but I'm going to make sure everything is up, hopefully well before November 1, and you'll be hearing more details on that. And so you don't have to be a podcast listener to be in that group, but it was birthed out of our podcast, and it's a great place for us to get members of our group. So those are a couple of things that have me stoked. Also, this week we had an amazing event in Redwood City. About 35 of us gathered. I really want to shout out Eunice Choi. Thank you to the great listeners in NorCal who came out. We had so much fun. That was awesome. And I'm actually recording this right now from where our event will be in a couple hours, our last one. That's right, our Santa Monica event. I'm here. Beautiful facility. Love it. Have to shout out Leanna Premiera. She is hosting, and she has such a great place and has shown me so much warmth. I am so excited. And I'm leaving from recording this podcast to pick Susan up at the airport. And Vince will be on his way over. And we hope you guys will have a great time here. I'm confident that you will. So what I want to do today is I want to share with you observations from my visit so far that are really standing out to me. I'm not getting into particular schools, particular school culture. That'll come out in the spotlights. Just things I think you really should be aware of when you do your college visits. When you do 13 in the last, 11 days, it's sort of, you can just do some thinking and reflection. Like, what are some things that have stood out to you overall? You've done 13 visits now since the 9th of September. And I want to share 4 of them with you. And so the first one may seem trivial, but it's not. And it is, give yourself 45 minutes extra time because parking is a fiasco on these visits. Of my 13 visits that I've done so far, the only place that I've been impressed with the parking has been Santa Clara University. All 12 others, I've not been impressed. What do you mean you're not impressed? Poor signage. What do you mean you're not impressed? Lack of directions. They send you into a big parking garage, and it's hard to find a spot. Or they send you into a big parking garage, and then you got to download a mobile app, and then you got to pay on the mobile app, and then you go to another school and they use another mobile app, and you got to go through the same thing. Or you go through all of that, and then you got to go down, enter out. I remember one school I went to, I did the whole parking thing with the mobile app and all that. And I thought that, I see where I'm heading right over there. Head over there and there's admissions and I'm good. So I waited in my car. I was checking messages, texting a bit. I go over there and now I had to catch another train. After I went through the parking with the mobile app, got to catch a train. Takes 15 minutes for the train to come. So I could just go on and on and on, but give yourself 45 extra minutes. I'm serious. From what you think you would normally need, because parking is just a problem and it's somewhat understandable. You got a lot of people that need cars and especially in expensive areas to provide that amount of parking. I would say my single biggest complaint, not even I would say, I can definitively say, the single biggest complaint as I've talked to student after student after student on all these campuses I visit is the parking. So first point, give yourself plenty of time for parking. Clearly read the instructions. A lot of them do send out instructions in advance, but it's still complex even with their instructions they send out. All right, I'm going to spend a little bit more time on this next one. This is something I've been thinking about a lot. And that is simply this. And I've said this on the podcast before. I've talked to several people on this trip who I've met about this. I'm going to go into more detail. If you take the 13 colleges that I visited, probably 12, maybe even 13. I'm serious. Of the schools, my impression over all of the schools was very similar after a 3 to 4 hour visit than it was in my first 15 to 30 minutes. And the question is, how could that be? I'm not coming in with a closed mind. And when I say my impression, understand something. When I visit colleges, I visit very much through two lenses. The most important lens, and this really occupies 99% of my thinking, is what students would this school be a good school for me to refer people to? That's primarily the prism I'm looking through. But I'm still a human, and I'm going to actually be talking about this in some up-and-coming podcasts about biases that we all have. I'm still a human, and so I still have my own eye. And I can't help but also, while thinking of who would I refer here, I can't also help but have a reaction about whether I would like the school myself personally. I think any human sort of would have that reaction. And so I'm primarily referring to how much I like an institution if I was considering going. But the other one is also there, right? Like who I feel I'd recommend. That does evolve a little bit as I get more information, but it's still fairly similar to what I think in the first 15 to 30 minutes. So how can that be? I've been thinking about that a lot. And here's what I think is going on here. And I think this is important. I think there are some factors, and I'm going to mention 5 of them, that have such an impact on your impression of a place that these things are readily available or impressionable really early in a visit. And I just think it's worth being conscious of them. So what are these things? Well, the first is the area around the college. So when I visit a college, I spend a lot of time just driving around like a mile radius all around the campus, just getting a feel. And you get a sense of an area, right? Part of this is what I call campus setting: large city, small city, college town, suburbia, remote or rural. Part of it has to do with just the stores of the place, are there, the nature of the place. All right. Densely populated, sparsely populated, the financial, condition around the area, the safety of the area, the feeling you get an impression. And the impression of the area right around the college has a big impact on you. So I think that's one of the big reasons why the impression is oftentimes very similar. 3 to 4 hours. I usually do a 3 to 4 hour visit. This is my typical visit when I visit a college. I'm going to do an information session and a tour, typically 2 hours, sometimes 2 hours and 15. Some of these tours go long, even 2.5 there. And then I'm going to have conversations with students and conversations with admissions. And that's another hour and a half. So that's my typical visit. So I spent 3.5, 4 hours on a campus. And I think the same thing for the most part that I was thinking 15 minutes in. I think a lot of it is the area around the campus, all of those things. How does that resonate? Second thing is the size. Size has such an impact on a perception of a school. Is it tiny? Is it small? Is it mid-size? Is it large? Is it extremely large? And then when we talk about size, we have to also talk about 2 different components of size. For example, let's just take one example. When I visited University of California, Santa Cruz, that's a 2,000-acre campus. It's really a large campus. Stanford, huge, over 8,000 acres. Santa Cruz, however, is one of the smaller UCs in terms of population, right? Because you're in a forest. So there's size in terms of the acreage, and then there's size in terms of student body size. Both of them have a real big impression. So the first is the surrounding area around the college. Second is the size. Both campus size and student body size. The third thing that I think really impacts, and this is very broad, but I'm going to say the type of kid that you observe. The type of kid that you observe. Now, that's a lot of things, right? That's everything from how they dress to how they walk, how they behave, how you see them interacting. It's all components of compositional diversity, racial, ethnic, gender, international. It's, do they seem more like designer clothes wearing? Do they seem a little more alternative and free spirited? Just type of kid that you observe. They seem very social. They seem stressed. Are they chatty and, in groups and smiling? Are they individual and serious and sober? Like, just kind of type of kid you observe has a real big impact. And the fourth one I really hit on already when I was talking about the area around the college, and that's really campus setting. So that's a big factor. And the next one is the architecture of the place. Something I haven't talked about a lot. I can't believe how much architecture impacts your perception of a college. And this is where beauty is really in the eye of the beholder. So, I'm having a conversation yesterday because I drove yesterday from Santa Clara to Santa Barbara to Santa Monica. And I'm talking to families I'm working with on the way down, and we're having a conversation about architecture. And the mom says, I love Gothic architecture. And the daughter's like, I hate Gothic architecture. So it's really like two people looking at art painting and seeing different things. And there's neither a right or a wrong. But I find the architecture of a place really, really, really impacts your perception of the place. I personally kind of like that cohesive, unified look, where you can tell there was probably one architect and everything's been patterned in a similar way. I like that. That fits my eye really nicely. The student I was having a conversation with, she was like, I don't like that. That looks, to her, it was like going into a suburb and all the houses are the same. They're all cookie cutter and it lacks character. But architecture really, really, really impacts your overall perception of a place. It just really does. And I don't think it's something that happens on a conscious level. I think it happens on a very subconscious level, not on a conscious level. But all of these things in a very short period of time really impact your perception. Another is kind of like green spaces, how you react to green spaces. Green spaces versus concrete jungle, right? Big difference. Some people like the concrete, more urban vibe. Some people like, the green spaces. Another thing that really impacts the perception in a major way is the campus what some people call protected or enclosed or distinctly set apart from the surrounding area. So even if it's in an urban area, when you're on campus, you would never know you're in an urban area because it feels so self-contained. It feels like its own entity. Versus, does it like bleed into the surrounding area? And the cars are coming by the streets or, and you hear them, you hear the sirens and the noise and the energy of the city. It's not a right or wrong. All these things in a really, really quick period of time form an impression. So much so to the point where I don't have a problem with somebody saying, and I used to, let's say in the past, somebody said, hey, listen, I'm going to go to a major city, Boston, Philadelphia, a place where there's a lot of colleges. And we only have a few days. In the past, I would have been like, you got to do a real deep dive on a college to really understand it. And here's all the things you need to do. Good visit's going to be 3 to 4 hours to do it well. I don't have a problem saying, you know what? We're going to jet set in and, we don't have a lot of time, but we're going to just get on to a bunch of campuses. We're going to spend a short period of time from there. And from there, we'll come back and take another trip to the ones that my daughter and my son could see themselves at. Now, that sounds so anti-intellectual, so you're not going to use all the knowledge that you would glean from all the information. It's one factor. But for most people, the visceral reaction they get almost instantaneously, it's going to be the same impression they're going to have 3, 4, 5, 6 hours later. And I tell people to trust those instincts. Don't decline. Don't ignore them. They're important. They're important. So listen, I'll have a tremendous amount more to share with you about these trips, and especially in these spotlights. There's only one other time that I visited this many schools in a short period of time. It was just before the podcast started, in like 2018. And I did 37 schools in Connecticut and Massachusetts. 37 schools. It was crazy. And I got a little bit into New York, but it's mostly Connecticut and Mass. And so that's the only other time I do like a super long trip like this, like once every like 5-7 years. And you just get some things just stand out when you just visit so many schools in a short period of time. So you'll be hearing a lot more, but you're going to be the one that's going to have a lot to say, in this. All right. What's the next thing I want to really emphasize, from my trips? You got to talk to students. You have to talk to students. If there's one thing that can change the perception a little bit, it's countless conversations with students. Certain things just surface, what they love, what they hate, what they would change, what departments they think are amazing, whether they feel safe, what kind of kid they feel would do well at the school. I mean, it is riveting at times. And I'm actually going to do something for 2 reasons, and I hope this will be helpful. I'm going to try something different I've never done before. I'm going to take 10 conversations that I had with students at UC Berkeley, where I spent 2.5 hours just talking to students, 2.5 hours talking to students. And I took detailed notes. And I'm going to share 10 different conversations with you, not sharing names. I don't even ask for names. I will tell you things like where the student's from, what they're majoring in, what year they're in, just to have a little context. And I'm going to share in detail what they like about Berkeley, what they don't like about Berkeley, who they think is a great student for Berkeley, what they think are great. I'm going to do all of that. And I'm going to turn it into, it's a little different than a college spotlight. It'll run in that segment. Just, I try different things. Some work, some don't. So we'll see if you guys find that to be helpful. But I'm doing it for a couple reasons. One, I think it's a unique kind of ethnography kind of look into Berkeley as a school. But also one of the main reasons I'm doing it, to be totally honest, is to inspire you that you can do just what I do. I just go up and introduce myself and I say I'm from Atlanta and I'm a college counselor and I'm trying to find out the right type of student to recommend to this school. Would you be willing to answer a few questions? But you can do the exact same thing. You can just say, I'm a student. I'm seriously considering coming here. Would you be willing to answer a few questions for me about your school? The majority of the time they say yes. People actually like the fact that you respect their opinion enough to listen to what they have to say. I only got blown off like 2 times in all my conversations at Berkeley. And some of my conversations were very lengthy. So I'm going to be sharing, you're going to be hearing about that. I think you're going to find it fascinating. And it's such a great way of peeling back the onion and really getting to the culture of a school. So it's just something you have to budget for in your time when you're planning a visit. It is so rich. It is so rich. And this was literally just yesterday for me. So I'm still brimming over in enthusiasm from 2.5 hours talking with all kinds of students from all kinds of walks of life at Berkeley. So please, please, please make time for that if you're seriously considering a college. And then the last thing I want to share with you is this. Go back and talk to admissions. So many of the admission offices are available after the tour. I mean, I talked to 3 different admission officers at University of California, San Diego. 3 different ones, just picking their brains. 55 minutes. At Santa Clara was 30 minutes. Most of the schools I did it for 15 to 25 minutes. That was like standard. And you can do it too. And one thing I've noticed over the years is more tour guides actually announce this at the end of their tour. If you have questions at the end, go back and talk to admissions. I don't remember that as often as I hear it now, like 15 years ago. They welcome those walk-ins. They welcome that. Obviously, it helps to ask great questions. So put some thought into what your questions are. But those are just my thoughts so far. You'll be hearing a lot more from these trips. I'm getting excited, and I hope you are as well. And we have a brand new interview coming up, which I like. I love this interview. It's a test for our listeners because it's very weedsy. I was talking to a listener, in NorCal about this. I'm like, I think you might like this interview. It's really, really weedsy. She's like, well, we love weedsy, Mark. So hopefully you guys love weedsy. But I've said this before. I'm going to say it again, and I really believe this. If you listen to this interview, all 5 parts, and you take notes, I think the only people that will be more knowledgeable than you when it comes to understanding why if a student gets 6 offers, they're all over the place, are financial aid officers. You'll be more knowledgeable than school-based counselors, private, public, CBO, IEC. You're going to, I said once before, you'll be in like the 0.1% of most knowledgeable people. I really think that was not doing it justice. I don't think 1 out of 100,000 people will be as knowledgeable as you are. So listen, take notes, and you can be close to an expert on this topic because that's how weedsy we get.
And now this week's interview with a special guest.
Okay, friends, Aaron Wolf and I are going to discuss 17 reasons why college aid offers are all over the place and vary from school to school. In part 1, Aaron gives her backstory. Then Aaron shares reason 1, different costs. Reason 2, policies of gapping versus meeting full need. Reason 3, different income protection allowances. And reason 4, different asset protection limits. Listen and enjoy. Friends, I am ecstatic. I'm here with Aaron Wolf, the Director of Financial Aid at Bucknell University. Welcome to the Your College Bound Kid podcast, Aaron.
Hi, Mark. Thank you so much for having me here today.
Yeah, well, Bucknell has been great for us. We had your VP of Enrollment on about 18 months ago, and I don't know if you knew that. She had just
I heard
come from Elon not too long before that.
Well, she's been a great addition to the university, and we're thrilled to have her here for sure.
Well, we're thrilled to have you. You're going to revisit a topic we did in our year 1, 2018, back in we first started with David Jelinas, who you may know. I don't know if you know David. A lot of you financial aid people know each other. Do you know David by any chance?
I don't personally know David. I've heard the name, certainly through the financial aid community since his tenure in the financial aid world.
Yeah. So we're going to look at why is it that a student could get 6 offers and they're all over the place in terms of what they're asked to pay. And it really hit home for me. I see it every year, but it hit home for me this year because I had a student where there was a $60,000 difference from 2 schools that both said we meet full demonstrated need, and both schools said we give no merit-based money, and there was literally a $60,000 difference. One was saying you have to pay full, and one was saying you qualify for $60,000 in need-based aid. So it just confuses the heck out of people, and I thought we would try to unpack it. So, but before we start, we always like to know someone's backstory. It helps us understand the context from which you speak. So share whatever you feel would be helpful for us to learn about you, Aaron.
Sure. I have been in higher education for 20 years, just over 18 years in financial aid. I will say it was never an intention of mine to work in higher ed nor in financial aid, but I found my way here after graduating undergrad degree in business administration. I worked in banking for a large regional bank here on the East Coast, and I was in consumer lending and also in the security side. And at the time, my alma mater was looking for someone to join their advancement team, and so I actually joined the institution on the side of doing the planned giving and helping with the securities part of that, which introduced my world to higher ed from the employment side versus being the student. And over time had begun working on scholarships and whatnot with alumni of the university. And lo and behold, got to know my financial aid colleagues very well. And through the course of some positions being opened in the office, I found myself diving in and trying to understand all of the rules and regulations, and started as an assistant director then and have worked my way up through the financial aid opportunities at that prior university and found my way here to Bucknell in 2018.
Well, we're thrilled to have you. You're the fourth financial aid professional we've had. We've had Davidson, we've had WashU, Smith College, and now Bucknell representatives. So what keeps you in financial aid? You've stayed in it a while. You must find it, some of it rewarding or enjoyable.
This has been a year, which I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about, the free application for
Yes.
federal student aid, which would be the FAFSA. This would be a year that was very challenging. And certainly I will say the one thing about financial aid is there's never a dull moment. And that's what I will say. I think it keeps me interested in that there's always something new to learn. It's a challenge every day. I enjoy getting to know our students and families, and certainly navigating the complexities of higher education and affordability with our students and families. And it's not always easy. Money's a difficult topic that can really concern as families are starting this process and really unpacking financial aid, which again, this topic is so important because what you said earlier is why it is complex. But it's really seeing the students find their way to the institution and seeing them be successful through. So again, I hope I'm here in 20 more years doing this
There
work.
you go.
It's not easy, but again, I think once you get sucked in, you kind of stay in this world.
I love it, love it, love it. Well, let's just dive in, and I'm going to share with you, some of the things I encounter, and I'd love for you just to have a little commentary on them. So I guess the first and obvious, most basic one is some schools have different price points to begin with, right? So an extreme example would be if somebody was looking at a local community college, let's say, and it wasn't even residential, and it's like $3,000 or $4,000, and they're looking at Bucknell, and they can make $500,000. They're not going to pay more than the total cost of attendance at the lower priced institution. So that one's so obvious I almost didn't want to mention it, but I would imagine that you still sometimes get some appeals from people that may not understand that may be like, why is this school asking me to pay? Am I correct to assume that
Absolutely.
not everybody knows that? Yeah.
Yeah. The cost of college is the first component really when factoring in, where does my family fall? You said it well, the community college are definitely at a different price point than your private liberal arts colleges. And then you have the state schools in between,
Sure.
flagship institutions, and we're all over the place. And our budget constraints are different at each institution, and what we're able to do in terms of institutional dollars versus really looking at what resources are coming from the federal and or potentially state, depending on where you live and where those dollars go. So the cost of the school is the first component we look at. And then, we layer in what's called that student aid index from the FAFSA, which we'll get into a little bit more, or our institutional expected family contribution, or EFC, which again, we'll talk about institutional awarding from the lens of a private school and how that factors into decisions. But cost is the biggest component, and yes, we get we get appeals, and we can talk a little bit about professional judgment probably later,
Yeah.
to really get into what are we looking at and how can we work with families to really understand and clear up confusion on the price point, number one, but then why there is the disparity with the aid decisions.
No, well said. So let's go to another one, which is whether a school gaps or meets full need. And we have listeners at all different points of the spectrum with their knowledge of this vernacular. And you know how financial aid is, it can get
Yeah.
very technical. So we're going to talk about some complex things today, but I don't want to assume that everyone has a solid financial understanding. So do you want to explain this? This is common
Sure.
financial aid language, right? Gapping
Yeah.
versus meeting full need, and explain what they are and how it's going to be a difference if a school gaps versus meet full needs on a package. So why don't you
Yeah.
explain that for us, Aaron?
The first thing when you talk about the lingo and the language that we use, I've often said we need a FAQ glossary section on our website to really have families understand what we're talking about. And so often we, as a staff, we have to remind ourselves that not everyone speaks our language,
Sure.
and it can be confusing. But there is different policies on gapping, and what that means is that really we look at unmet needs. So as an institution, and we go back to the cost of college, your cost of education, which can be in the form of direct expenses, which a student is charged for tuition, fees, room, and meals if the student's residing on campus. And then the school bakes in what's called indirect expenses. So those are not necessarily billed to the student, but they are charges that a student might see or feel depending on their residency status on campus, and certainly maybe related to the major and field that they're studying. So those indirect expenses can vary. It can include travel expenses, personal expenses, like, if you need to buy shampoo to live on your campus. Then you also factor in the book expenses and other books and supplies. Those types of things are all included in there. So the cost is really the first thing we look at. And then we take that calculation that comes from the free application for federal student aid, known as the SAI now, Student Aid Index. So there's the federal calculation, and then again for a school like Bucknell or another private similar to us, we use institutional methodology. So we're taking a look at the family's financial strength through that calculation, which we'll get into, and we determine what your financial need is. And a school may have, again, different budgets and constraints that they may be able to meet a family's full demonstrated need. So let's say your cost of your school is $20,000. The SAI is $10,000. Your demonstrated financial need is $10,000. A school that's able to meet 100% of that is providing $10,000 at least of aid to meet that family's demonstrated need. When you're looking at that, some schools may use student loans to meet the need. Some schools may have policies where they don't. So it's going to vary institution to institution and the philosophy and priorities that they may have as a school. Because of budget limitations, some schools may only be able to meet 95% of some students' demonstrated financial needs. So instead of meeting $10,000 for that student, they're only meeting $9,500. And so then you have that, what the family is going to pay, but you add that additional $500 that wasn't covered by only meeting 95%. And that's where that gap falls in, and where families are maybe a little surprised that they're actually paying a higher figure than what they felt or what they were told through the calculation. And again, like I said, it really comes down to the budget constraints on the college campuses, and really deadlines are so important. So as a financial aid officer, I always tell my families, please apply on time, because as we're going and working through applications, there's certain dollars that may run out, and so those are pieces and just little reminders that I want to weave in as we have a discussion today, as new listeners and new to the college process may want to consider.
Yes. And would you say it'd be fair to say, Aaron, that most schools gap? I mean, very few schools have the ability to meet full financial need. It takes tremendous amount of resources to do that.
100%. You are correct. Many schools are just not able to meet 100% of demonstrated need, even though we might have endowments that might tell people otherwise. Sometimes those funds are not restricted to use for financial aid, and they're meant to be used in other areas on campus. So that's the point that we have to look at. What do we have, the resources we have, and how can we best equitably distribute those amongst our campus population and our applicants to the school.
Yes, great. So hopefully people understand that. So, gapping is going to be the difference between when the school runs the assessment of your income and the assets through either the FAFSA or the CSS profile. And if there's a difference between what they give you versus what it looks like you're qualified for, then that's the gap.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about another one, and that is income protection allowance. So if you could tell our listeners what an income protection allowance is and explain how not every same school uses the exact same income protection allowance. Why don't you explain that one?
Yeah, the income protection allowance can be a little confusing, but it's really I always say it's the designation of what is protected from the family's income versus the base expenses, more or less. So that means that, a family must have at least a certain amount of income after taxes to meet the family's most basic expenses. But a family with an income that is around that or equal to what their income protection allowance may be cannot make decisions necessarily on how to spend their income on all their basic expenses. So for income protection, it's really meant to represent a family standard of living. But when I look at it from an institutional part of it, we kind of protect based on the certain age of the parent, number of it's sensitive to the number of family members in college, number of family members in home, to protect a basic amount of that family's household income before utilizing that towards expenses like college. And again, it's changed over the course of several years through the federal lens versus how schools may use it on institutional methodology. I will say a lot of conversations we have here on campus a lot are related to our student employment and, is there income that is protected for the student, even if they're earning dollars. And I will say, like for this year, just over $9,400 was protected in the formula for students who are working and calculated in. So yes,
and that's
there
a big
is income,
increase at the new.
That is,
Yes,
it's been going up every year, and I want to say it's over 10,000 as I was looking ahead, but it does adjust every year. And the tricky part is, as far as the federal formula is concerned, through the FAFSA, there was some issues with the formula this year, that impacted the availability of the FAFSA due to some adjustments that were supposed to be put in place for inflation. And I know that may be confusing to some families, but again, it can be the difference of your aid determination being off a few $1,000s, when looking to apply those formulas. So again, those things adjust every year, and some private institutions may look at and adjust things a little differently. And we'll talk about number in college in a little bit and how that's, calculated in the formula now or not. But it is a very fairly large part of the foundational part of the calculation for federal financial aid, since income is such a big driver in determining financial aid.
Yeah. So I think of it as like the amount of money that you need just for subsistence, right? Like just for basic living. And like
so much of your income is going to your mortgage and insurance and cars, correct?
Right. And, food and stuff. So like a college doesn't expect you to have any money that could be used toward college if you can barely handle those expenses. Now, the family doesn't get to make that determination. You can't say, well, I eat at Ruth Chris every week, every day.
Right.
And so that's my food budget, right? This is done through FAFSA and profile.
Right.
Would it be fair to say that FAFSA, free application for federal student aid, which uses federal methodology, has a standard income protection allowance, but colleges like Bucknell that use the more complex, more in-depth, more accurate, even though it's a pain in the butt for people, right? The CSS profile method, individual schools can have their own IPAs, income protection allowances, that use the institutional methodology. Is that fair to say?
That is fair to say. I would say that we all have different levers that we can pull during the awarding cycle. Again, when we go back to looking at families, looking across the board at the equity of our packaging, we want to apply the same type of standards. And so we may see what the federal formula is looking like and make some determinations institutionally on how we want to evaluate our families across the board. using our institutional funds, and how can we shape the calculation when we're determining how to best apply our packaging formulas.
Case in point, when I interviewed David Jelinas and topic of Princeton came up, and he said, they have more money than God. And so I was talking to a student, this year who's just ecstatic with his Princeton package. And literally they only asked for $8,000 on direct billing, and the family, nobody else could compete with that.
Yeah,
but
that's fabulous.
But that's partly like they changed their number to like the first $100,000 of doesn't go into their financial aid calculations. Like most schools don't have anywhere near the ability to just say, we can't count your first $100,000 at all in assessment. So that's one thing right there that could totally throw off comparison between two schools, right?
I would say that definitely on the formula side, but there's a lot of schools, there's a lot of affordability initiatives as the demographics are shifting in the country. And as we look at that, and we all are trying to do more with the dollars we have. So some schools are even looking at income brackets and deciding if a family makes, $75,000 or less, then they might be offered a full tuition scholarship regardless. And they're doing other things above and beyond just the formula, but they're using the overall incomes to help drive their awarding process as well. So those things wouldn't necessarily be baked into the formula, but they're doing those outside of it too, again, to follow some affordability priorities that they have on their campus as well.
You said something, Erin, that I think probably would be helpful to explain to families. And it can explain a lot of variation in aid awards. But can you talk about how both income and assets go into coming up with an SAI? And that's true whether it's federal methodology, FAFSA, or institutional methodology profile. But how income tends to be so much more of a driver than assets. Can you discuss that? Because that's sort of foundational to a lot of the stuff that we're talking. It might be helpful for people to have that foundational knowledge.
And I will say that's a great question, because a lot of times, when we're doing financial aid sessions and meeting with families, they're concerned that maybe they've saved money and they're thinking, oh my goodness, because we were able to shelter money and really work hard to put some resources aside, not necessarily planning to use them for college, but just for emergency purposes, how is that going to impact our financial aid award? And I still go back to that, such a big driver, especially on the federal side, is going to be the income portion. Now, this year with the FAFSA, the simplified FAFSA, there were some changes that I know were not popular with some families, where now businesses are evaluated. Before you had to have 100 or more employees for the business to be calculated, but now even small business owners are being asked for business asset information, and farms are being included again. So there's been some, concerns from families that may have not had to report that in the past and now are reporting them, and how a school may view that. And that's where conversations individually with the school is really important as well. And I always encourage, our listeners today to make sure that just because, the formula may calculate a certain way, have the conversations with the financial aid officers, ask questions, because there might be things within the information you provided that need to be reviewed a little further. We're reviewing thousands of applications. And so sometimes, we having those conversations, allowing us to go back and look at things a little closer is important. But with regards to assets, on the parent side, we're really only looking at just under 6% of that value that a parent's reporting is actually calculated toward their asset component of the calculation. And then for students, on the federal side, it's really 20%. Sometimes on the institutional side, they might look at 25%, or maybe a school's doing something even a little, more that they're looking a little harsher on the student assets. Again, school specific. So, but again, assets it doesn't hurt you to save money, again, because most of the calculation is going to be driven by the income part of things. But, we can get into the differences between profile and FAFSA, probably maybe further into some of these questions. But there will be some differences and things that you're going to see as questions related on the applications for financial aid that are revolving around assets. But I will tell you that schools may be using that information for not necessarily as a negative or impact against the Students Award, but it might be more informational as we're developing our 4-year long-term strategy for supporting the student also while they're on campus.
Yeah. So, friends, when Erin says 6%, it means if somebody had $100,000 in the bank,
Yes.
then 6,000 of it would be expected to go toward college.
Yeah.
Friends, this concludes this segment of my interview with Erin Wolf. We hope you join us next week for the next segment. On Thursday's episode, the final part of Andy Strickler's interview, all things athletics and recruiting and admissions. And then for our question from the listener, our round table is back. This time it's Vince and Susan and Hillary, and we're taking a question from a listener about which AP scores should you report. It's part 3 of 5 of the deep 2-hour dive with David Graves on all things the University of Georgia. And because both our interview and our spotlight are both on a college, the interview is the spotlight, and the spotlight is the interview. Friends, I want to close out with a text that really warmed my heart. I'm not going to share the mom's name because I never asked for permission, but here's what she says. Mark, I had to share this with you. I just came back from a dinner with a group of local moms in town. The conversation, bull caps, was all about our seniors as they prepare to apply to colleges. And a mom said that she heard the greatest quote from 3 different people this week. And then it says, parenthesis, obviously podcast listeners. It's not where you go. It's what you do when you get there. And it's what you do when you get out of there. And that mom was right, friends. It's not where you go. It's what you do when you get there. And it's what you do when you get out of there. That is what will determine your career success. See you on Thursday, friends. And that's our show. A big thank you to you, our listeners, for tuning in this week. If you find this podcast helpful, please follow us and you'll get every single episode as soon as it is released. If you're interested, there are a few ways you can really support our podcast. You can click the share button and send it to your friends and acquaintances. You can help us pay our staff and our expenses by donating on our website. You can write a review for us on Apple or Spotify. I'm the producer of the podcast, but we have a fantastic team of 15. Shout out to our co-host, Dr. Lisa Ruff, Dr. David Williams, Linda Depker, Susan Tree, Vince Garcia, and Julia Esquivel. And to our substitute co-host, Sylvia Borgo. Our sensational sound engineer is Nemanja Motvich. Our amazing music is from Victor Allen Weeks. Marketing designs are from Kimberly Glass. Lily Parikh manages our Instagram. Our image editor is Talha Khan. Joy Stucker does our website episode updates. And our webmaster is Stalianos Dimitriou. And if you want to have a coaching session with Lisa, Linda, or me, just text me at 404-664-4340. If you have a question you want us to answer, or if you have a recommended resource or article you think we should discuss, just send it to questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com. Our favorite method is for you to record your own voice at speakpipe.com/YCBK. By the way, check out our website, where you'll find lots of content that is not on any podcast app. Our website is yourcollegeboundkid.com. If you want to learn about other hot admissions topics, follow us on Twitter at YCBK Podcast. We think of you as our listening family, and we look forward to meeting again with you every single Monday and Thursday.